Tonight on the Midnight Drive, we're doing something a little bit different. We're not looking outward. We're not looking downward. We're not looking upward. We are looking inward. There's a moment most of us have as kids when you realize that you're here. Not just existing, but aware that you exist. And if you stay with that thought just a little too long, things start to feel off. Words stop sounding like words. Your name feels unfamiliar. Even your own body can feel distant. It's not fear. It's not danger. Just a brief moment where the structure holding everything together starts to loosen. Tonight, we're exploring that edge. The place where reality doesn't break, but starts to slip. There's a question I like to ask kids, usually around ages 4 or 5. Old enough to talk about it, young enough that something is still changing. I'll ask them what their earliest memory is. Sometimes they answer right away. A trip somewhere, a specific place, a moment that's stuck in their mind. Sometimes I'll hesitate or say they don't know. But every once in a while, they'll describe something very clearly. A trip to the zoo. A car ride. Stopping for ice cream at a specific location. They'll describe picnic tables, or they'll describe what the napkin dispenser looks like. Usually it's very specific things. And what's strange isn't that they just remember it, but it's how certain they are about it. Like they're reaching back and pulling something forward without much effort at all. Then, as little as a year or two later, those same memories are harder to find if I ask them again. Sometimes they're completely gone. They're not replaced, they're just not there anymore. That pattern shows up often enough to notice, and there's a good reason for it. There's a concept called childhood amnesia. Most of us don't have stable, lasting memories from our earliest years. And it's not because nothing happened, but because the system that organizes experience into something we recognize as our life is still developing. Before that system fully forms, experiences aren't stored the same way. They exist more like fragments. Moments without a strong anchor. Scenes without a consistent narrator. At some point, that changes. Not all at once, but noticeably. There's a shift from simply experiencing things to knowing that you're the one experiencing them. That's where identity starts to take shape. Memory starts to organize itself differently. Suddenly, events get connected. Time becomes more structured. And a sense of you begins to hold it all together. Most people don't remember that shift happening. It just becomes the default. But sometimes you can feel it, especially if you go looking for it. I used to do that without really knowing what it was that I was doing, sitting quietly, asking myself questions that didn't have easy answers. Simple on the surface. But if I stayed with them too long, something would start to change. What am I? Not in a philosophical sense, not trying to solve it, just asking. And then asking it again. And again. Holding the question in place long enough that it stops feeling like a normal thought. At first, it just feels like curiosity. Then it starts to stretch. The idea of me became less solid, less defined. And there's a moment where it doesn't quite land the way it usually does. It doesn't feel like confusion. It feels more like something slipping. Like the system that keeps everything organized is still running, but somehow I'd stepped slightly outside of it. There were moments where it went even further than that, where even simple things started to feel unfamiliar. My own hands, my own body, not visually, not in a way that looked different, but in how all of those things felt. Like there was a slight delay between noticing them and recognizing them as mine. Not enough to cause panic, just enough to notice. And that's where things get interesting. Because nothing has actually changed. The room is the same. My body is the same. My surroundings are stable. But my perception of them shifted. Just ever so slightly. And that was enough to make everything feel different. Kids seem to find that edge more easily. Maybe because the system is still forming. Maybe because they haven't learned to avoid it yet. They don't have a reason to pull back. It feels strange, but it also is kind of interesting, isn't it? Like discovering something new about how their mind works. As adults, we don't usually go there on purpose. We like to stay inside the structure, inside the version of reality that feels stable and consistent. But that structure isn't permanent. It's maintained constantly. The brain is always keeping things aligned for us to keep our identity stable, to keep meaning attached to words, to keep your sense of self anchored to your body. Most of the time, it does that so well you never even think about it. But every now and then, you get a small glimpse of what happens when that process loosens. Not breaks, just loosens. For example, a word repeated too many times starts to lose its meaning. Your name feels like something you recognize, but don't fully connect to. Your body feels like something you're aware of, but not completely inside. Those moments are brief and easy to dismiss, but they do point to something important. The way we experience reality isn't fixed. It's built. It's maintained. It's held together by systems we don't usually notice. And if you press on those systems, even lightly, you can feel them shift. Just enough to realize they're there. Just enough to notice what feels stable is actually being held in place. Which raises a quiet question. If that structure can loosen, even for a moment, what does that say about how it works the rest of the time? And how much of what we experience is something we're actively maintaining without ever even realizing it. You're listening to The Midnight Drive, and tonight we're exploring the annals of our consciousness, filled with rabbit holes. And I would love to hear what your thoughts so far are about that. Wherever you might be listening, feel free to leave a comment below, or feel free to reach out to us on our hotline, The Midnight Drive, at 402-610-2836. If you leave us a message, we might share it on the show. Now, most of the time, you don't notice it happening. You wake up, you move through your day, you recognize things without effort. Your name feels like your name. Your body feels like your body. The room that you're in feels stable. Consistent, predictable. And that consistency creates a kind of trust. It's not something that you think about. It's something that you rely on. You assume that what you're experiencing lines up with what's actually there. That perception is a direct reflection of reality. But it's not that simple. Because what you're experiencing isn't the world itself. It's a model, a version of it, built in real time. Our brains take information in. Sound, light, touch. It processes it, filters it, fills in the gaps where information is incomplete, and then presents something that feels continuous, seamless, immediate. That process happens constantly, so quickly that it feels invisible. But it's certainly not passive, it's very active. A really, really easy example of this is just thinking about the end of your nose. Your brain has filled in a literal blind spot with your vision field to where if you really, really focus on trying to see the end of your nose, eventually you'll be able to see it. But the way that our brains operate is it just blinds it out so that we don't even think about it in our field of vision. Our brain is doing that actively. It's wild. Our brain isn't just receiving reality. It's literally constructing it based on what it expects to be there, what it's seen before, what it predicts will happen next. The predictive layer is what keeps things feeling stable. It allows you to move through familiar spaces without recalculating everything from scratch. You don't question the layout of your room every time that you walk into it, do you? You don't analyze every sound. You don't relearn what your hands are every time that you look at them. The model holds. And because it holds, it feels real, solid, reliable. But that model depends entirely on consistency, on patterns, on enough information coming in to confirm what our brains expect. When that input changes or becomes incomplete or is repeated in a way that strips it of variation, the model starts to wobble. Not collapse. Just it loses some of its precision. That's what's happening when a word starts to lose its meaning. You repeat it enough times, and the brain stops treating it as a symbol. It becomes just a sound, detached from what it represents. The connection loosens. Not because the word changed, but because the system that links it to meaning isn't being reinforced the way that it usually is. The exact same thing can happen with identity. Your sense of self isn't a single fixed point. It's a collection of processes. memory, body awareness, language, continuity over time. All of those things combine to create the feeling of being you. But if you isolate one part or hold your attention on it for too long, it can start to feel less stable, less automatic. You can notice your thoughts instead of just having those thoughts. You can observe your body instead of just simply being in your body. That separation is small, but it's more than enough to change how things feel. And once you notice it, it's very hard to ignore. Because it reveals something underneath the surface. The sense of self isn't a constant. It's maintained, moment to moment. The same way perception is, the same way that meaning is. That doesn't make it fragile. It just means it's active. Which also explains why certain experiences feel so intense. When that system is disrupted, even slightly, it creates a gap between what you expect to feel and what you actually feel. That gap is where disorientation comes from. Not because something is wrong necessarily, but because something doesn't line up the way that it's supposed to. The brain is still building the model, but the inputs aren't matching the prediction the way they usually do. So, it compensates. It tries to stabilize. Sometimes it succeeds quickly. The feeling simply passes. Everything snaps back into place. Other times, it takes a little bit longer. The mismatch lingers. And that's when you become aware of the process itself. Instead of just experiencing reality, you're suddenly aware of how it's being constructed. That awareness is unusual. Needless to say, we are not used to noticing it because it usually runs in the background, quiet, uninterrupted. But once it comes forward, even briefly, it changes the way we think about everything else because it shows us that what feels immediate is actually layered. What feels fixed is actually very flexible. And what feels like a direct connection to the world is something that's being mediated constantly. Again, that doesn't make it less real, it just changes how we understand it. There's also something else that happens when you stay in that awareness. The longer you focus on it, the more the system has to work in order to maintain itself. You're holding attention on something that normally runs automatically. That can create a kind of feedback loop where the act of observing the process changes the process itself. You start to notice it more. Small delays, subtle shifts. Moments where things don't feel as immediate as they usually do. Again, not in a dramatic way, just enough to register. I mean, this is the same conundrum that people run into when all of a sudden a microphone turns on and they're not used to speaking into a microphone, or a camera turns on and they say, talk. Same conundrum. Our brains aren't used to being watched while they're running processes in the background. If your experience of reality is something your brain is actively building, then what defines the boundary between what's out there and what's being constructed? Where does one end and the other begin? Most of the time, the line feels clear. You don't question it. You move through your day without needing to. But every now and then, you get a glimpse of that boundary. Not disappearing, just becoming visible. And once you've seen it, even briefly, it's hard to go back to assuming it was never there in the first place. You're listening to The Midnight Drive. This next part is optional. You don't actually need to do anything. You can just listen and observe. But if you want to try it, we're going to step a little closer to that edge of separation, of identity, existence, and consciousness. We're not going to go straight into the void. We're just going to get close enough to notice it. Then we'll come back. If you are in a place where you can sit still for a minute, that helps. We're not doing anything formal here. No need to close your eyes unless you want to. Just stay where you are. Let your breathing settle naturally. No need to change it. Just notice that it's there. Start with something simple. Pick a word. Any word. Something common, something you use every day. Usually it works better if it's a word that only has one syllable, like door, hand, name. It doesn't matter which one. Once you have it, repeat it. Quietly. Out loud or in your head. Just keep saying it. Steady. No rush. Let it sound the way it normally does at first. Familiar. Connected to what it means. Just another word that you recognize. Keep repeating it. Same pace. Same tone. Again and again. After a few seconds, you might notice something changing. The word starts to feel different. Not completely, just slightly off. Like the meaning isn't landing the way that it usually does. Stay with it. Let it happen naturally. At a certain point, it can start to sound like just a sound. Not a word. Not something connected to an object, just a pattern. A rhyme. Something your mind is producing, but not fully attaching to meaning. If that happens, don't try to fix it. Just notice it. This is a small shift, but it's enough. The connection between sound and meaning loosens. Not because the word changed, because the system that links it to meaning isn't being reinforced the way that it usually is. Now, let the word go. Stop repeating it. Just pause. Notice how quickly meaning comes back when you're not forcing it. The system resets itself on its own in the background. Now, try something else. Say your name in your head just once, the way you normally would if you were introducing yourself. Just your first name. Now say it again. A little bit slower. Let it sit there for just a moment. Pay attention to how it feels. Not the sound. The connection. Does it feel like you? Or does it feel like something you've learned to respond to? Don't try to answer it. Just notice whatever shows up. Say it one more time, and then let it go. Now, shift your attention to your body. Start with your hands, wherever they are. Resting, still. Don't move them yet. Just notice them. You know they're yours. That doesn't change. But for a moment, see if you can notice the difference between knowing they're yours, and feeling like they're yours. There can be a slight gap there, very small, easy to miss. But if you're paying attention, it can reveal itself. Now, let's expand that awareness slightly. Notice your arms, your shoulders, the position of your body in the space that you're in. Not visually, internally. The sense of where you are, how you're positioned, how your body is arranged. Most of the time, that sense isn't automatic. You don't think about it. You just are. But if you hold your attention to it, you might notice something different. A slight hesitation. A moment where it feels less immediate. Not wrong, just different. Now, we're looking over the edge. Now, go ahead and move your fingers, slowly, one at a time. Feel the movement, the control, the direct connection between intention and action. Let that anchor you. Now, move your hands, your arms. Shift your posture slightly. Bring your awareness fully back into movement. Look around the room. Take in a few details. A wall, a light, a surface. Really anything that's within your view. Let your eyes settle on something stable, something clear. Everything is where it should be. Nothing has changed. Your body responds normally. The space is consistent. That's enough. What you just felt, even briefly, is all part of the same pattern. The same system that keeps things stable. It can be observed. And when you observe it closely enough, it can shift. Just slightly. You didn't leave your body. You didn't go anywhere. Nothing external changed. But your experience of things moved, even if just a little bit. That's the same mechanism, the same underlying process, the same thing that shows up in different forms, different intensities, different contexts. Most of the time, it runs in the background. You don't even notice it. You don't need to, but it's always there, holding things together. Maintaining the connection between what you perceive and what it means. And every now and then, you get a moment like this, where you can feel that connection shift. Not disappear, just loosen enough to remind you that it exists. And once you've noticed it, even briefly, there's a part of you that recognizes it the next time it starts to happen. It's not something to fear, nor is it something to chase. It's just something to be aware of. Something interesting. Something to spin around in your mind. That small space between what feels automatic and what you realize is being maintained. That's where this entire week has been pointing. Different experiences, different environments, different intensities, but looking over the same edge. And now you've felt it for yourself. even if only for a moment. How did that exercise go for you? Were you just observing, or did you actually try it? I'd love to hear what your experience was like. Let us know in the comments below wherever you may be listening. And please, I really would love to hear your messages on our hotline, 402-610-2836, The Midnight Drive. There's something quiet about the way all of these things come together. Nothing we've talked about this week is extreme on its own. Not all the time. Most of it exists in small moments, subtle shifts, things that are easy to miss if you're not paying attention. But when you line them up, they start to point in the same direction, don't they? Sound that builds until it doesn't feel like sound anymore. A view of the earth that changes how everything feels from a distance. An ocean that looks calm from the surface but holds something vast beneath it. A moment where your body doesn't quite feel like it's yours. A simple thought that, if you follow it too far, starts to loosen the idea of who you are entirely. Different experiences, different settings, but the same kind of shift. A moment where the frame you rely on stops feeling completely solid. Most of the time, the frame holds, because it has to. You move through your day without questioning it. You trust your senses. You trust your thoughts. You trust that the world you're experiencing lines up with what's actually there. And for the most part, it does. Well enough that you don't need to think about it. But every now and then, something small breaks that assumption. Nothing collapses. Nothing disappears. It just feels different. Maybe a word loses its meaning for a second. Your name suddenly sounds unfamiliar. A room feels slightly off. Your body hesitates before it feels like yours again. Those moments don't last. The system corrects itself. Everything returns to normal. But there's that brief space where you can feel the process happening underneath all of it. That's what all of this has been about. Not the extremes, not the explanations. The process. The way your mind takes in the world and builds something stable out of it. And how that stability isn't something that you're just given. It's something that's consistently and continuously maintained. That doesn't make it a weak system. It makes it a dynamic system. It adapts. It adjusts. It filters out what doesn't fit. And it fills in what's missing. It keeps everything aligned so you can function without having to rebuild reality every second. But because it's active, it can also be noticed. And once you notice it, you can't completely unsee it. Not in a disruptive way. You don't walk around questioning everything. You don't lose your sense of self. But there's a small awareness now running in the background that what feels immediate is actually layered. That what feels solid is actually being held in place. That what feels like a direct connection to the world is something your mind is constantly shaping. That awareness can go a few different ways. For some people, it's very uncomfortable. The idea that perception isn't fixed, that identity isn't as solid as it feels. That meaning can shift. For others, it's the opposite. It's grounding, a reminder that experience is flexible, that perspective can change, that not everything has to feel locked in the way it does at first. Both responses make complete sense because you're looking at the same thing from different angles. Uncertainty on one side, possibility on the other. And neither one cancels the other out. They exist together. Just like everything else that we've talked about. The ocean is vast, but it's also part of the same world you stand on. Space is distant, but it holds the same planet you live on. Your mind can feel stable and still shift under the right conditions. None of these things are separate. They're different ways of looking at the exact same system, different entry points into the same realization. That what you experience as reality is something you're participating in, not just observing. And that participation happens so seamlessly, so effortlessly, that it feels invisible until it doesn't. Until there's that moment, however brief, where you can feel it happening. Where that edge becomes visible and then it settles again. The system holds. The frame returns. Everything lines back up. You move on. But something small stays with you. Not a question that needs an answer, not a problem to solve, just a shift. A slightly different way of looking at things. Now, if you didn't try that exercise out, let me reassure you, you're not going to be breaking your mind. You're not going to be breaking your perception by focusing on these things. You're not going to ruin your life knowing that there's processes happening in the background of your brain. It's fascinating to discover that. Like I said, it's a moment of 1, maybe 3 seconds tops to where you find yourself looking over the edge into something fascinating. It's really, really cool. And just like we went through the exercise, it takes a little while to get into that headspace. So you're not going to accidentally bring yourself into this spot. You're not going to accidentally be discovering all of these background processes while life is happening around you. It's not something to be afraid of. That said, I can also understand why uncertainty can feel like a threat to some. The next time a word feels strange, or a thought lingers a little too long, or a moment feels just slightly off, you might recognize it. Not as something breaking, but as something being revealed to you. And for a second, you're not just inside the experience. You're aware of how it's being held together. And then, just as quickly as it started, you're back, moving through it again, like nothing ever changed. Except now you know it can.